stop scrolling, because this video isn't about the person you can't forget. It's about the version of you that vanished when they left, and the quiet reason they're still in your mind. The mind doesn't cling to people. It clings to the version of you that met them. They didn't just walk into your life. They walked into your mind, into your energy, into places no one else had touched in a long time. And without even realizing it, they awakened a version of you that had been quietly sleeping. A version that you forgot was even there. A version that smiled more easily, laughed without overthinking, dreamed without fear. That's what made it feel special. Not the conversations, not the connection, but the way they unlocked you, like they had the password to a part of you even you couldn't access. You didn't just fall for a person. You fell for how you felt when they looked at you, when they listened, when they stayed a little longer than expected, when they asked how you were and waited for the real answer. It wasn't about romance or attraction. It was about safety. It was about being seen. It was about finally relaxing into a moment that didn't judge you, where you didn't have to wear a mask, where you didn't have to be strong. You just were, and that was enough. And then they left, maybe slowly, maybe suddenly, maybe without a proper goodbye, but either way, they left. And they took something with them. Not your heart, not your peace, but that version of you, the one that only came alive when they were near. And now, your mind? It won't stop replaying the memories, the glances, the laughter, the soft moments you didn't realize you were going to miss until they were already gone. And people around you keep saying, just move on. Stop thinking about them. Why are you still stuck there? But they don't understand. You're not stuck on them. You're stuck on you. The version of you that was allowed to bloom when they were around. The version of you that didn't feel broken. That didn't overthink every word. That didn't question if you were lovable. They didn't create that version. They just brought it to the surface, like sunlight does to a seed that's been buried too long. And when the sunlight disappears, you don't blame the light. You just miss how alive you felt when you were growing. Zen teaches us this truth softly. The memory you keep returning to is not them. It's your own reflection, frozen in a moment you haven't learned how to return to alone. Because what you miss isn't their voice. It's the way their voice made your voice feel heard. It's not their eyes you're haunted by. It's the way you felt like you finally mattered. When those eyes looked back at you, you've mistaken their leaving as a loss of love. But the real loss was that you stopped being that version of yourself the moment they were gone. And here's where your healing begins. You don't have to go back to them to feel whole again. You don't need their presence to be that version of yourself again, because that softness, that light, that peace was never theirs to give you. It was always yours. They just reminded you that it was in there all along. Now the journey is this: to be that version of you again, without needing them to show up for it, to wake yourself up, to hold your own mirror, to become your own safe space, to speak softly to yourself the way they once did, to trust your light again, even in the dark. Because the mind doesn't really cling to people. It clings to how you felt when you came alive. It clings to the moment you stopped pretending and finally just existed without shame. And if you can remember that version of you, you can return to it, slowly, silently, one breath at a time. They didn't give you that version. They just helped you see it. And now it's your turn to become that version, not for anyone else, just for you. Because you don't need to be seen to know that you exist. You don't need to be remembered to matter. You don't need to be loved to be lovable. You just need to remember the truth. You were whole long before they arrived. And you're still whole, even now that they're gone. Their presence activated a wound you didn't know was there. You didn't meet them by accident. Their presence in your life was too specific, too sharp, too timely. Like they were sent to press a part of your soul that had been numb for years. At first, they felt like a comfort, like ease, like light in a room that had been dark for too long. You may have smiled more, slept easier, breathed a little deeper. But something else happened, too. Something under the surface. Something quiet, but unforgettable. You started to feel emotions you couldn't name. Sudden sadness, random anxiety, memories you thought you had outgrown, and you didn't understand why. Why did someone who made you feel so good also bring up so much pain? Zen says, people do not wound you. They reveal the wound that was already waiting. You weren't broken by them. You were exposed. They didn't create your scars. They just knew, without trying, exactly where they were. Maybe you had a fear of being abandoned, and they left without warning. Maybe you never felt chosen, and they never quite made you feel like a priority. Maybe you always felt too much, and they loved you just enough to make you believe it was safe, then stopped. And now, you're left wondering if you're being punished. But Zen whispers gently, this isn't punishment. It's illumination. They were a flashlight, not a weapon. They entered your life and unconsciously shined light on a part of your soul that had been hiding behind walls for years. The truth is, you might have gone your entire life not realizing you were still hurting from something that happened long before they arrived. Childhood, a past heartbreak, words you never unheard, moments you never admitted were unfair. And then they came along, touched your heart in a specific way, and suddenly your soul remembered the pain it had been begging you to feel. This is why they're still in your mind, not because you need them, not because you love them, but because the pain they revealed still needs to be honored, understood, heard. You can't forget them, because you haven't yet faced what they showed you. Not about them, about you, your fear, your wound, your old version of love. But that's the invitation, to stop trying to forget and start asking, what part of me did they awaken that I've been avoiding all my life? Because healing doesn't happen by deleting people. It happens when you decode what they awakened in you. And once you see it, once you hold that wound with care, the memory softens, the noise quiets, and your mind no longer needs to repeat it, because your soul has finally listened. You keep revisiting them because you never let the emotion finish speaking. They're not in your life anymore, but they're still in your mind. Not just once a week, not just in random dreams, but constantly, quietly, unexpectedly. And you keep asking, why can't I just let go? Why does their memory keep pulling me back? But the truth is, you never actually left that moment. Not emotionally. Your body moved on. Your routine moved on. Even your social media looks like you've moved on. But the emotion, it's still there, unspoken, trapped in a moment that never got the closure it needed. You didn't cry the real cry. You didn't break the real break. You didn't scream into the pillow with all the truth that was locked in your chest. Instead, you were strong. You distracted yourself. You convinced yourself that it's fine, it's meant to be, it's whatever. But your soul knows better. And Zen says, What you resist persists, and what you bury returns louder. So here it is, returning, in flashes, in smells, in songs, in random hours of the night when everything is quiet but your heart. You're not obsessed, you're unfinished. That love never got to complete its sentence. That goodbye was rushed. That truth stayed stuck in your throat. And the memory? It's not asking you to go back to them. It's asking you to come back to yourself, back to the version of you that still needs to feel. Not think, not explain, not analyze. Just feel. Maybe you're still angry. Or maybe you're still waiting for them to say something they never will. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I miss you. But they won't. And that's what hurts the most. So the emotion keeps looping, trying to finish what it started, trying to release what it never got to fully express. This is why you keep revisiting them, because your soul is still sitting in that final scene, waiting for a real ending. Not the one that happened, but the one you needed. And here's the hard truth, whispered gently. That ending might never come from them. It has to come from you. You have to be the one to feel it all now. Let it crash. Let it tremble. Let it hurt more than it ever did before. Because the only way out is through, not around it, not above it, not behind someone new, but through the raw middle of it, where the tears are real, the shaking is honest, and the healing isn't cute or pretty. It's sacred. This isn't weakness. This is your soul finally speaking, after being silent for too long. So let the emotion finish its sentence. Let the grief close its door. Let the love write its final period, because only then will your mind stop replaying the scene. Only then will your body stop bracing every time their name comes up. Only then will your peace stop being postponed. You're not stuck on them. You're stuck in a feeling that was never allowed to breathe. So give it space. Give it time. Give it permission to finish. And you'll be surprised how quiet your mind becomes. When your heart is finally heard, your mind won't release the person. Because you still want a different ending. You keep telling yourself you've moved on. You've deleted the photos, blocked the number, unfollowed the account, filled your time with distractions. But still, your mind drifts back to them, in the quiet, in the in-between hours, when there's nothing else loud enough to cover it up, and you wonder why. Why do I still think of them? Why do I still imagine conversations that will never happen? Because your mind isn't clinging to them. It's clinging to the version of the story you never got to live. The version where they came back, where they understood, where they held you tighter, fought harder, chose you louder. You're not stuck on the past. You're stuck on a version of the past where things ended differently, where the goodbye was replaced with, "I'm sorry," where the silence was broken with, "I miss you," where all the love you gave finally returned to you. But that ending doesn't exist. It lives only in your imagination. And that's why your reality still hurts. Zen teaches, you don't suffer from the thing that happened. You suffer from the version of it you keep rewriting in your head. It's not what was that breaks your heart. It's what could have been, what you wanted to happen instead. But here's the hard truth. Every time you rewrite that ending in your mind, you delay your healing in real life. Because your soul can't grieve a story that hasn't stopped playing. And every time you imagine them changing, coming back, apologizing, finally seeing your worth, you unknowingly hand them the power to still control your peace. But they're not controlling you anymore. Your attachment to that imaginary ending is, so what if? You stop trying to edit the story. What if you finally accepted the version that actually happened? The one where they left. The one where they chose something else. The one where you gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. Not because you weren't enough, but because the story was meant to end there. And maybe that's the real healing. Not getting what you want, but accepting what you got with grace. It hurts. Of course it does. We all want the version where love wins, where people change, where timing aligns. But Zen says, peace is not found in perfection. Peace is found in acceptance. You're not weak for holding on. You just loved the potential more than the reality. You saw what it could have been, and you mourn that more than the person. And that's okay. But now it's time to wake up, to let the fantasy fall away, to grieve the real ending, the one that actually happened, the one that didn't have music playing, the one that was quiet, awkward, painful, and unfinished. Because that's where your healing lives, in the messy truth, not the polished dream. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to forget them. But you do have to stop holding on to the story where they save you, because they're not coming back to fix what they broke. That's your job now, to stand among the ruins and rebuild yourself without waiting for someone else to bring the tools. The mind will only let go when it no longer needs to believe that a different ending will make everything okay. You are the ending now. You are the closure. You are the one who chooses peace instead of fantasy, reality instead of illusion. So let the imaginary ending die and watch your real life finally begin. That person was a sacred interruption, not a lifelong chapter. They came into your life like a question you didn't know you were asking, like a knock at the door you forgot you left open. Unexpected, unexplained, unforgettable, and at first it felt divine, as if the universe finally gave you something that made sense. Someone who looked at you and saw something sacred, someone who didn't just understand you. They aligned with you, like two stars crossing at exactly the wrong moment, but burning too brightly to ignore. You told yourself, this has to mean something. This must be fate. And maybe it was. But fate doesn't always mean forever. Zen teaches, not everything that enters your life is meant to stay. Some things are only meant to awaken. You thought they were your forever. But maybe they were just your alarm clock. Something that entered your story, not to complete you, but to shake you out of the part of yourself that had gone numb. Before them, you were drifting, existing, functioning, but not really feeling. And then they arrived. And suddenly, you were breathing different, thinking louder, loving braver, hurting deeper. They interrupted your normal, and for a moment, you thought that was love. But maybe it wasn't love. Maybe it was the universe screaming, wake up, your soul is asleep. They weren't here to stay. They were here to start something inside you. And now that they're gone, you keep replaying the story, trying to find where it went wrong, trying to rewrite the ending, trying to make them stay at least in your memory. But what if it was never meant to be a story at all? What if it was a scene, a short, beautiful interruption meant to reveal what you forgot about yourself? They didn't fail you. They fulfilled their assignment. Their role was never to be your lifelong chapter. Their role was to interrupt the one you were stuck in, to wake you up from comfort zones, from emotional autopilot, from fear disguised as stability. They pulled you out of the shadows and reminded you what it means to feel again. And yes, it hurt when they left, because the part of you they woke up didn't want to go back to sleep. But here's the truth, Zen whispers gently. When the soul is awakened, the source of the awakening is no longer needed. They were never your peace. They were your permission to go and find it. They were never your future. They were the flame that burned down who you were never meant to stay as. You wanted forever, but forever would have ruined the point. They weren't a home. They were lightning, quick, intense, unforgettable, not to stay, but to ignite. And now your work isn't to chase what left. It's to honor what awakened, to protect the part of you they unlocked, to carry that spark forward and build something new from it. Don't turn their memory into a wound. Turn it into a window, so you can look back and say, that moment changed me, and that's enough. Because just like a storm, they didn't arrive to stay. They arrived to shift the sky, to tear the clouds, to wash the dust from your soul. And once that was done, they left, as they were always meant to. Now, it's your turn. To stop writing stories where they return. To stop rereading chapters that were never meant to continue. To close the book with gratitude, not resentment, not confusion, just peace. Because some people don't enter your life to love you. They enter to wake you. And once you're awake, you no longer need the one who rang the bell. You just need to keep walking, eyes open, heart alive. Story, your own. The reason they stay in your mind is because you never got to be silent with them. You still think about them, not all the time, but enough. Enough for their name to live in places you don't speak about. Enough for their memory to echo in the quiet. Enough to wonder why the feeling never fully left. You did everything the world told you to do. You cut contact. You deleted the messages. You convinced your friends that you're fine. And maybe you are, mostly. But there's a kind of ache that doesn't look like heartbreak. It looks like silence. It feels like unfinished space. And that's what they left behind. Not chaos, not betrayal, not a dramatic ending, but a quiet, unfinished moment that never got to breathe because everything moved too fast. The emotions, the excitement, the way it went from strangers to something, to why aren't they here anymore? And through it all, you never had stillness. You never sat beside them in peace and just breathed. You never watched a sunset in silence and just existed in the same moment. You never looked at them, not to speak, not to explain, but just to be there, fully present. It was all motion, all moments stacked on top of each other, no room to pause, no sacred silence to feel the depth of what was being born between you. And now, that's what keeps circling in your mind, the silence that never happened. Not the fight, not the words, but the absence of a moment where nothing needed to be said because everything was already understood. Zen teaches, words are noise, presence is proof, but you never got to offer presence. You were rushing to understand what it was, to protect it, to hold it together, to keep it, but not to experience it. And that's why you still feel them, not because they were the one, but because you were never fully with them in stillness. You were busy holding your breath, hoping they wouldn't leave, that you never stopped to actually breathe with them. And now your soul is trying to return to a moment that never existed. A moment where you just sat next to them, not worrying what it meant, not trying to protect the future, not afraid of losing it, just being in the presence, with the energy, with the softness, with yourself. with them, but that moment never came. So your mind is trying to create it now, in daydreams, in imaginary conversations, in sleepless nights where your chest feels heavy and you don't know why. You keep seeing them in your head, but it's not really them. It's the version of the experience you never got to have. The calm, the stillness, the peace. You don't need their voice again. You need a moment of silence, the kind you never shared. Not awkward silence, not distant silence, but sacred, sitting with someone and feeling like you're home silence. The kind of silence that says, I don't need anything from you. I'm just happy you're here. But life didn't give you that. Or maybe you weren't ready to allow it. Maybe you were too afraid to slow down, thinking stillness would scare them off. So now you live with the echo of a moment that was never born. And here's the part that hurts the most. They probably don't even know. They don't know what you were hoping to feel. They don't know the silence you were saving. They don't know that you're still carrying a version of them that never even happened. But Zen says, it's not the person we miss. It's the version of peace we never let ourselves feel while they were near. So how do you let go of someone you never got to be still with? You give that silence to yourself now. You sit with your memory, not to relive it, but to finish it, to breathe into the space they left, to close your eyes and imagine, not the last text, not the goodbye, not the ending, but a moment where you and them sat in the sun, or the rain, or on the floor, and just existed, without fear, without performance, without a clock. That moment may never come in real life, but you can give it to yourself in spirit, not as a fantasy, but as a form of closure, because you're not haunted by the person. You're haunted by the stillness you never shared with them. And now that silence is yours to sit with, to honor, to heal. Let it be quiet. Let it be slow. Let it be sacred. Because maybe they weren't meant to stay, but the peace you were seeking through them, that's always been yours. You just have to slow down enough to feel it. They were a reminder of what you thought you didn't deserve. They made you feel something, but you didn't know what to do with it. You didn't push them away, but you didn't let them all the way in either. You smiled. You responded. You maybe even tried. But deep down, a part of you kept thinking, this is too good. This can't last. They're going to leave. And the truth is, you didn't fully believe. You were allowed to be loved like that, to be chosen, to be cherished, to be seen without earning it. So you did what people do when they're still healing from silent damage. You braced for the fall before anything even dropped. You waited for the distance before it ever arrived. You studied their every word, looking for proof that they were only pretending to care, because that's what pain does. It rewires your expectations until love feels suspicious and attention feels temporary. You may not have said it out loud, but somewhere deep within, your heart whispered, why would they stay? Why would someone love me like this? What if I'm not worth holding on to? And that's the ache you carried. That's the wound they touched. Zen doesn't teach us to hate the past. It teaches us to see it clearly. And clearly, this was never just about them. It was about the part of you that never healed, from being made to feel unworthy in the first place. Maybe it started years ago. A parent who withheld love unless you performed. A friend who only came around when you were convenient. A past partner who made love feel like a transaction. So when someone came along, and offered presence, kindness, warmth, without needing you to earn it. You didn't trust it. You told yourself they were too good, that you were too broken, that people like them don't stay with people like you. But Zen says, what you reject on the outside often reflects what you have not yet accepted on the inside. You weren't rejecting them. You were rejecting the part of yourself that believed you weren't enough to keep them. They were a mirror. That's why they stayed in your mind. Because their love, real or not, reflected something you were still denying. That maybe, just maybe, you did deserve it. You weren't too complicated. You weren't too emotional. You weren't too much. You were just carrying too much. You hadn't unpacked yet. And now, their memory lingers. Not because you still want them, but because you're still at war with the question they accidentally asked, why don't you believe you're worthy of what you want? And that's the lesson. That's the real reason they entered your life. Not to complete your story, not to be your ending, but to expose the fracture in your self-worth that love couldn't hide anymore. Zen doesn't ask you to chase them. It asks you to face what their presence revealed. The pain, the doubt, the disbelief that you could be deeply loved without having to suffer for it first. And maybe they didn't stay. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they were never meant to. But their role was sacred because they forced you to ask the question you've been too scared to answer. What if I've been pushing away the very thing I was always worthy of receiving? You keep thinking the lesson is about loss, but it's not. It's about remembrance. Remembering your value, your enoughness, your wholeness, even if no one ever taught you how to feel it. They were a spark, not a home. They were a voice, not a promise. They were a reminder that just because you haven't always received real love doesn't mean you never deserved it. And maybe the next time it comes, you'll be ready. Not because they made you whole, but because they reminded you that you were never broken. Zen says, you do not become worthy by being loved. You are loved when you finally believe that you are worthy. So take this pain and don't wear it like a punishment. Wear it like a message, a sacred interruption that pointed you inward toward the one person you've been trying to be loved by your whole life. You think you're missing a person, but you're really missing what they reflected back to you. You say you miss them, and maybe that's true. You miss the way they spoke to you, the way they made you laugh, the way their presence gave the room a strange kind of comfort. But if we're really honest, it goes deeper than that. You're not just missing them. You're missing the version of yourself that came alive in their presence, the parts of you that lit up when they looked at you like you were rare, the softness in your voice when you felt safe to speak, the way your heart opened without warning, because for once, it didn't feel like it had to guard itself. You felt important. You felt chosen. You felt seen. But here's the truth, Zen gently reveals. They didn't give you that glow. They just stood still long enough for you to finally see your own reflection. That's the part that hurts the most. You weren't just attached to them. You were attached to who you thought you were. When you stood next to them, the way you smiled, the way you laughed freely, the way you dreamed again without shame, that version of you, you haven't felt them in a while. And it's not because they left. It's because when they left, you left with them. They were a mirror. You didn't fall in love with the glass. You fell in love with the reflection you saw inside it. They said something kind, and suddenly you believed in your worth. They listened closely, and suddenly your voice mattered again. They looked at you like you were enough. And for a brief moment, you stopped questioning if you were. That's what you miss. Not the person, the reflection. And when the mirror cracked, when they walked away, or changed, or fell silent, it wasn't just about losing them. It was about losing that version of you that only seemed to exist when they were around. Zen doesn't tell you to forget the mirror. It teaches you how to become your own, to learn how to reflect your own light without needing someone else to hold it for you. Because the truth is, that version of you never came from them. It came through them, but it always belonged to you. You were already worthy, already radiant, already capable of softness and joy and beauty. They just gave you a moment where all of that felt safe to surface. And now they're gone, and now you feel dull. Not because they took your light, but because you forgot it was yours. So you confuse their absence with your own disappearance. But listen closely. You haven't disappeared. You're just in hiding. You're not grieving them. You're grieving the version of you that forgot how to be that alive without being seen. But Zen whispers softly, you are not the reflection in their eyes. You are the light itself. And once you remember that, the mirror doesn't matter anymore. You can smile again without needing their approval. You can dream again without needing their reassurance. You can feel seen without being watched. Because real healing isn't about bringing the person back. It's about bringing yourself back. The self that felt confident, the self that felt lovable, the self that dared to speak and laugh and trust, the self that existed before fear, pretended to protect you by making you smaller. And yes, their energy was real. And yes, you had a connection. But the deeper truth? They just awakened the version of you had buried beneath layers of doubt, insecurity, and silence. You don't miss their voice. You miss the way your voice didn't tremble around them. You don't miss their love. You miss how easily you loved yourself when they were around. But now, you get to rebuild that on your own. You get to look in the mirror and say, I was never hard to love. I just never learned to love myself when I was alone. You get to recreate that version of you with your own hands, not because someone sees it, but because you finally do. So when your mind says, I miss them, ask your heart, or do I just miss who I was allowed to be when I wasn't hiding from myself? And then gently remind it, that version is still here, still breathing, still waiting, not for them to return, but for you to. You don't need to forget them. You just need to remember why they entered your life in the first place. Not to stay, not to complete you, but to awaken you. So, take the lesson, bow to it, and walk forward, lighter, wiser, freer, because the moment you understand the memory, the mind finally lets go of it. You were never meant to forget them. You were meant to understand why they still echo in your mind, why certain faces return when the world gets quiet, why certain energies feel unfinished, even after they're gone. But now you know. It was never about chasing them. It was about remembering you, the version that smiled deeper, breathed softer, loved without asking for permission. They didn't give you that. They reflected it. And now it's your turn to become the mirror, to be the presence you once searched for in someone else, to let your stillness speak louder than your ache. So if they cross your mind again, don't chase the memory. Don't resist it. Just smile gently and say, thank you for reminding me who I am. And then breathe, because you don't need to go back. You just need to go inward